Welcome to the Pure Property Podcast. Whether you are considering buying your first investment property or reaching property mogul status, we dissect the fundamentals through to large-scale property development and everything in between.
G'day, how you going? Phil Tarrant, co-host of the Pure Property Podcast with Paul Glossop. We're back again in the studio to try and make sense of what's going on in the world today. Paul, how's things?
Mate, they're good.
Yeah.
But you know, there's a bit going on.
That's a really poor opening question. How's things? It's very Australian.
How's it going?
How's it going? What's happening? What's going on?
Well, if I'm honest though, there is certainly, it's been an interesting start to 2026 for a variety of reasons, and I think there's going to be more interesting things to come this year, not just from a property standpoint, but an economic standpoint and a government standpoint, and obviously geopolitically, there's a lot of things that are happening as well.
Yeah, and I've sort of spoken about it over many years. Not in great depth, but Australia doesn't operate in a bubble. It's part of a global community and a global economic environment. So it's influenced by things that happen outside of Australia. And we've seen that through the COVID pandemic. We've seen that through the various machinations of trade. Positioning from various different countries, and there is a consequence here in Australia to it, and largely, we manoeuvre through it. Most recently, we see the war in the Middle East. Still yet to see exactly what that will mean for Australia, but even today I was reading in the paper, expect travel issues for the next 5 months because most of our flights go through the Middle East. Already, analysts are really looking at what's happening with sort of the price of a barrel of oil. Expect fuel to go up at a point in time, and it's probably already moving at the pumps now because I know most fuel stations will probably go, here we go, it's time to jack up the pricing. And the Treasurer has come out and said there's not going to be any, he's not going to subsidise.
No.
It's not going to subsidise
which shouldn't have happened
pricing.
in the first place. I mean, it was an unfortunate vote grab, I think, which a lot of those short-term subsidies typically are. It's funny you say that, though, Phil. Driving into the studio today, driving past the airport, I typically don't see many planes when you're going northbound.
They're all parked up along
that. All of the Emirates and Qatar planes are all parked up. Big Airbus A380s just sitting there. I think I counted 5, maybe 6 sitting there idle, doing nothing. And you think, well, if that's here in Sydney, the ramifications are obviously global. Yeah. And there's a lot that's going to be happening and changing. But with that comes opportunities. It's not like we're devoid of what happens when you can't explore other parts of the world as well. Unfortunately, we know all too well only 5 years ago what was going on then.
What was going on, and the commentary we had 5-6 years ago, and what you're talking about, there's a COVID pandemic, and even now is that be aware of all these things, try and be informed, be educated, like understand and appreciate it. What is the flow and impact to the Australian economy still yet to be played out, but there will be inflationary pressures as a result of this. It's just a consequence of these type of things, particularly when you think of the amount of resources that flow through the Middle East and also manufactured in the Middle East, and we're talking specifically about oil. If fuel prices go up, there will have inflationary impacts. So I'm sure the government doesn't want these additional pressures on what is already some pretty significant economic mismanagement driving up inflation. So still to be played out. But what does it all mean for property prices in Australia? What does it mean for property investors? Well, you've got to view it through the lens of what has been a big piece of commentary taking place in Canberra is changes to the tax regime, specifically targeted property investors. So still a lot of uncertainty there, but folks that I know who I like to think know, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of what and when there will be some tax changes relating to property investment. So what are you telling your team about this and your clients?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Phil, is that we're effectively in a position, and we kind of knew that we'd be in a position of change, and not just from a taxation standpoint, but when a federal government has a majority, which they do, and a pretty large majority at the moment, they're going to try and shovel a few things through which might have been on the nose and might have been problematic, only in sort of those more balanced parliament scenarios. But when we're talking specifically about the potential CGT changes, which will likely be announced in the May budget, what we're really trying to understand is, okay, well, there might be changes to tax and tax benefits, but the likelihood is that we don't see anything that's going to actually address what is the discussion point here, which is housing affordability. Now, just because you collect more tax receipts doesn't mean you're creating more A, housing, and B, making housing more affordable. And I kind of look at this as we're sitting around a circular table right now. We can say that you carve it in half, you carve it in a quarter, you carve it into eighths and so on. You're still only carving out the same pie. The reality is that we're not creating this potential change from a 50% capital gains tax discount for residential property that's held for more than 12 months in a personal name. Currently, if you sell at a profit minus all your expenses, 50% of your profit goes into your bank account. The other 50% is taxed at your marginal tax rate the year that you sell or the financial year that you sell. The proposed changes will potentially bring that back to 25, 35, somewhere in that range we expect. So is there less that will potentially come your way after tax? Yes, that's a potential. Does that change the value creation of the property? We don't see how, because even if this halved the amount of property investors in Australia, and there's currently about circa 2.4 million private investors in Australia, mums and dads who make up the bulk of the rental accommodation for residential property, if that's halved to 1 million, none of this changes the fact that we are still in deficit, somewhere around about 40 to 60,000 new dwellings being created based on international as well as births and deaths migration as far as where the demand's coming in. You can change the taxation, but you're not creating more property to then stem into. And if you change the fact that a lot of these people don't go from maybe moving into the country and buying a property, or renting a property rather, they can all of a sudden buy a property quicker. And if it brings down the price of property, that might be theoretically what happens. There is not more property. And this is what this doesn't address. And I've also had a thought about this a fair bit. So let's assume, Phil, that the average price of property in Australia right now is circa $1 million for the average property in any market when you essentially average it out. If that were to drop to, let's say, around about $700,000, just assume that was a 30% drop in property value. And I'm certainly not suggesting there's going to be anything close or any kind of drop as a matter of fact at all. But what this does is that if you did make more property more affordable, and I look at my own personal property portfolio, if I were looking at property to buy in 2026 and all of a sudden we saw a price drop, we're not going to see rents drop. They're actually going to go up. So that one is pretty much for me a foregone conclusion, because there'll be less property and more people looking to rent property. So let's assume rents stay the same, but the price of the property drops by 30% in that example that I talked about then. You all of a sudden look at property and say, well, not only is it a growth play, it becomes a yield play.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you're looking at it and say, well, I don't actually necessarily then concern myself with CGT, because I might then therefore say I'm not going to sell, because maybe what was a 3, 4, 5% yielding asset becomes a 6, 7, 8% yielding asset, and I can only get 4.5% in the bank at any given point in time if I were to park my money there. So if I have spare cash and I'm looking at it, well, I can hold bricks and mortar leveraged with growth and also now get a far higher yield if assets were to drop in value. This is the issue that arises here. So for me, the policy is completely flawed on a whole range of fronts. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to go through, but ultimately, I guess the bigger question is it going to affect property prices? I don't see how, because we have this systemic issue with actual supply.
Yeah, supply. It's a supply-man discussion. And my view of all of this is this discussion and potential changes around the tax regime connected with property investment is just a massive distraction of the real issue, and that is we're not building enough housing. And why aren't we not building enough housing? We'll have a discussion around that, because that's core and critical, and notwithstanding the challenges connected with it, I don't think enough is happening in and around it. But messing with the tax regime, if you pull one lever over here, there's going to be a consequence somewhere else. For every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Was it Newton's third law, second law? Sorry, physicists out there. First law. So if you start messing with the tax regime in relation to capital gains tax, you're going to reduce potentially the number of investors in the market, and or you're going to reduce the liquidity or the selling of stock, right? And the selling of stock i.e., properties transacting from one to another, is one of the biggest drivers of income for state governments because they make money out of stamp duty for it. So the capital gains consequence is a federal issue, and I think the losers when it comes to this, and this is a winners and losers discussion.
Yep.
One of the losers is going to be
state
governments, and the other loser is going to be all Australians that hold property. So let's remember, 2/3 of adult Australians have property. They either own their home outright or they own their own home with a mortgage against it, and or they've got either version of them and they're a property investor.
Yep.
So do you really want to start messing with the wealth of 2/3 of the Australian who contribute to the tax coffers in Australia? It's a very dangerous policy. Now, the argument for a lot of economists, depending on what side of the political spectrum that they live, is, well, it's why should property investment income be taxed at a different rate than the work done by people for generating a salary? This is the logic behind it all, and say it's out of kilter. Why do they get a 50% discount? You know, the other side of the argument is, well, the 50% discount is assuming that there's just natural inherent inflation. Properties go up because of inflation, amongst other reasons as well. So that's to compensate for inflationary measures. So, you know, what I'm hearing is they're going to land somewhere around 33% as a effective tax rate. The biggest issue, and this is where they'll need to tread very carefully, and look, realistically for property investors who own more than one property too, or are actually in it for the purpose of investing, they've probably got different structures anyway, and they'll be able to compensate around it. There'll be ways to maneuver. There's other tactics there. You'll just, depending on what they do with negative gearing, but you can just keep yourself geared in a particular way. They're probably at about 33%. However, if they start messing with grandfathering around it, if they go, this is effective today, and what happened beforehand isn't preserved, it's all it's all that you're either going to get a massive sell-off because if they go, May budget, this is what we're doing, it's effective 1 July, or it might be the financial year after. They're going to have to give people are just going to either liquidate their properties, and you know that may have an affordability consequence. But the modelling I've seen is showing it's probably going to have about 1%. A 1% impact on price. And I don't trust any of the modelling coming out of anyone in Canberra.
No. I mean,
I don't trust it. We saw it, 0.6% increase, the first home buyer scheme. It's going to have over a 5 or 6 year period, they told us.
Bam. Within the first 6 months, boom, gone.
Yeah.
And we were sitting here 8 months ago saying, you watch what happens here. And it happened immediately. It didn't take that. That was an immediate consequence. And this is the hypocrisy of it all, right? You're like, okay, well, let's go and give first home buyers the ability to buy a property at $1 million even with what is effectively 50 grand, no stamp duty, no nothing. Now, if you want to have a consequence of what that does for property prices, you go and see that immediately. 15% of all home buyers are going to be first home buyers. And effectively, you've just all gave them a leg up. That was probably another 5 years it would have taken them to get there, which they got in straight away. Yeah. This, on the other hand, and I think just as you were talking through that, Phil, I look at, because there's so many different consequences that you start to think about. Well, if I own property, and let's go back to the, say 70 or 80% of all property investors own one asset, and it's typically in their own name. If I'm 40 years old and I've bought an investment property 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, and it's got some equity in it, and I can think, okay, well, I sell today, and let's say I bought it for 500, it's worth 800. Let's just use that as an example. 300 grand in growth that I've held it. Let's just assume I've held it for 8 years. Let's just go down that example. I'm 40 years old and I've got technically 20 years until technical part pension age or ability to actually sell that property or take some sort of superannuation and maybe choose to down tools and not work and take some of my superannuation. I look at it to say, okay, well, if I've got 300 grand profit in a property, I could sell it today and 150 goes in my bank account and then the next 150,000 is subject to my taxable income of that year. I might say, yeah, sure, I'll take it now so I can lock that in, or alternatively, if it's 33%, that all of a sudden becomes, instead of 150 grand and go straight in my back pocket, it might be more like 100 grand and there's 50 grand that's left on the tax table. That's not great. Now, obviously, no one's going to want to take that as if they had the alternative. But I look at the situation and say, well, if it was part of my long-term plan to buy this property to help me into my future, i.e. my retirement, I'm not going to sell this property until my working career is finished. Because what happens then is that once you're done earning the larger salaries that you would have in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, if you say, okay, well, I'm going to retire now, then the year that you retire, and technically on paper you don't have anywhere near that, then you're like, okay, well, I'll sell then because my taxable income of that year is nothing. And essentially then I can add it to that year. So I'm going to get the tax advantages then anyway. So it just changes the way that people think about property. And I know we've got a colleague, Ben Kingsley, who's sitting as the chair of Picker. And if anyone hasn't looked at it, he's just launched a video on YouTube talking about some of these ins and outs and a lot of the outcomes that I think are going to be realistic. And it's a very good watch and listen for anyone who's wanting to know more about this. But I think what it ultimately is going to do here is that you're just going to see more people be long-term property investors, which is great because you want to provide accommodation. You provide tenants guaranteed property. There's going to be less speculative approaches to say I buy and I sell in 3 years' time because markets do fluctuate. You can get markets that have huge spikes and people might just think I'm going to get some of that action. I can think of markets like Darwin right now where people are thinking I'm going to jump in there and get 2 years worth of growth and then get out. That's the type of buying which I think ideally will stop because of this, because I don't like that type of speculative investing for property in particular. But for me, if that wipes that segment of that type of investing mindset out, fine. But it's not going to address affordability.
No, it's not going to address affordability and it's not going to address the supply issue. So, there'll be ways and means to maneuver around any changes. There'll be consequential changes to CGT regime. I'd caution around grandfathering because, and once you're on the property ladder, this is what politicians largely don't talk about. Once you're on certain politicians, once you're on the property ladder, you don't want your property go down in value.
No.
So you've worked hard to invest in inverted commas, the Great Australian Dream, which I think is, we've moved on from that as a nation. We need a new Great Australian Dream.
Correct.
And that needs to be defined outside the scope of this particular chat. But once you're in the property market, you're not going to go, I've just bought my dream home with my new partner and to build our family in the suburbs of any given capital city, right? You go, isn't this great? It just goes down by 10% or 20% because of changes. Like I can't see anyone who's going to want that because what that will instantly do immediately and probably for a period of maybe 3 to 4 or 5 years will put people in negative equity. So they're trapped, right? And this is another potential loser is a potential loser at the bank. But again, the potential loser for all these people who are subscribing into this on the 95% deposit scheme and they're all in negative equity, trapped in property that then they have kids and they only get a one income that they can't sell. The loser is the Australian taxpayer because we've underwritten 15% of the value of these things. So, I'd be very careful.
It's a tax grab. I mean, let's just put it that way.
But the government needs it. They just need more money. And this is it. They run out of dough.
And it's not an immediate one either. And I know we won't go on this too much longer, but I think for those who are trying to think, well, what are the other consequences here? You touched on the difference between the federal tax, which will be part of this capital gains tax, and then the state tax that are balanced out. It's a really difficult conversation that I think a lot of state leaders are going to have with federal government because you look at it and say, well, a very large amount of their income is not just stamp duty, but it's land tax. Yep. So if you're taking out that 2.3 million of private property investors and I'm going to go an extreme and say you drop out another couple of hundred, if out of that you're losing your percentage,
you don't pay land tax on a principal as residence.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So what are you doing? You're encouraging more people, and then the system is set up to actually take tax. Yeah. So I pay land tax. You pay land tax. I know a lot of property investors out there who pay land tax. Now I don't love paying land tax, but I do pay it. And I pay it regularly on an annual basis in multiple states. Now, the reality is that's part of property investing, and that is also part of what I knew buying property is that there's a tax involved for holding a certain amount of property at a certain value and over that. Now, if that's taken out, then there's another gap in state government coffers. So all of a sudden now you've got not only less stamp duty, but certainly and pretty much guaranteed less land tax because if there's less property investors, there's less tax to grab from property investments.
Yeah. And you start messing with the property economy. Already we're struggling to get builders in there to build stuff. You got less business. I think 97% of all building firms are small to medium businesses, right?
Correct.
Like they're the people who are paying payroll tax, a lot of them as well.
And that's all.
The government doesn't pay. By the way, the government doesn't pay payroll tax.
No, no, they don't. Because they're government.
Yeah. so of the 50-something% of all Australians now derive. We've got the biggest payroll tax. We've got the biggest. I pay payroll tax. We've got the biggest public service per capita than anywhere else in the world, I'm told these days, right? So that they need to be paid for, plus all the other sort of spending that they're doing, and that comes from private business paying payroll tax. So you mess with land tax, you mess with stamp duty, and there will be consequences for, and already some of the policies of Labor governments around disincentivising people to start their own businesses because they're just gouged the whole way through.
It's just infinite. And then lump on top of all that rents will go up. Mark my words, that if there's less property for rent and there's less properties that are being built.
I'm sure they'll legislate as well going, well, you can't put your rents up though.
Well, that's what the Greens were talking about a couple of years ago. Oh my God. Could you imagine? I mean, could you imagine what happens to this country from a private tenancy perspective? Like, obviously, you can't put your rents up for X amount. The next time it comes up, it's going to the moon. Yeah. Because you cannot afford to hold the property, regardless how much money you want to collect. The market dictates how much rent you can actually charge, because if you're charging too much, no one rents the property. Yeah. And that's, again, it comes back to the dynamics of supply and demand. If you're asking too much, no one pays it. They'll go take the cheaper property. Yep. Build more property. Make it easier and cheaper to build more property.
Yeah. So this tax discussion's is a distraction, and now they throw negative gearing into the mix, maybe having another look at that.
Yeah.
What our friends down in Canberra, the government, fail to sometimes articulate clearly is that for a period of time, a property may be negatively geared, but then
typically it is.
Typically, yeah. Because you're buying at 80%. Yeah, it's negative geared for a period of time, right?
Correct.
But let's say someone has a long-term buy and hold thing. Let's say someone holds a property for 20 or 30 years, right? Yep. So for a period of time, it will be negatively geared, maybe 5 years. And let's say they don't do anything with it, right? It'll just naturally become positively geared sort of 5 years. So for the next 25 years, it's positively geared. And what does that actually mean? That means you're actually contributing
and you're paying
to the tax regime. but so they never actually present it like that, saying.
So the percentage is actually in the government's favour to incentivise people to hold investment properties because you're actually paying tax.
Yep. So, but
amazing.
Sometimes they forget to talk about these things. But when you start running out of the money, you get desperate.
You do, don't you? You knock
desperate.
On the doors that you probably shouldn't be knocking on.
Yeah. So this is just part of the cycle. Strap in.
Yep.
Watch with interest.
We've seen it before.
You can't do much about it.
No.
I actually get fatigued talking about it because I just go. Oh.
I like it being more satirical in the sense that you're like, you know what, you just laugh about it because I don't want to take on a job in government, and I don't want to be anywhere near it. But when it comes down to it, you're like, you just laugh. You know firsthand more than most, Phil, that the reality is vast majority of the people who are making up these policies have very little, if any, idea about what actually goes on.
They've got no idea what's going on in the real world. You know, they call it Canberra bubble, right? Yeah. For a good reason, because they sit in this like closed ecosystem of madness, right? And fortunately, we do have some, and I'm not giving polys a hard time. You know, hats off to all polys because it is a calling,
horrible job.
It's a tough job.
Yeah.
But when you see stuff coming, like I quite like Senate estimates, which is quite entertaining.
Yeah.
And if you've never watched it, like some of them are absolute crackers.
Some of the highlights.
But, some of the stuff I've seen coming where like I think Senator Patterson, right? He's a Liberal senator, and he likes to give it a crack. But senator's job is to hold the lower house to account, right, and pass bills and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully sensibility prevails, right? And he's there going, why did you spend $50,000 on one room's carpet in Parliament House? Couldn't you just go down to Carpet Court to buy that? Like, grilling, they're like,
but it's not tartan.
It wasn't exactly the right colour.
No, exactly.
It's the way taxpayers' dollars are being spent right now is it's becoming an issue, and it will manifest. Here's a hot tip: there will be a change in government.
Well, this is what happens, right? When
there will be a change in government.
Then you get a new manager.
There will be a change in government. This is
what happens in private functions, and this is what will happen in our public functions.
Well, another area where a lot of people are talking about mismanagement, and this is the sort of dichotomy of trying to run the economy here. we're in a material undersupply of property, and
Yep.
we've sort of spoken about how tax laws won't change new supply. They've got nothing to do with anything. They're probably going to put a handbrake on it, right? However, we still have strong migration and shrinking household sizes. So these are all the dynamics of all of this, right? Like, people don't want one-bedroom apartments anymore, but more people are living singularly. People are getting married a lot later. They don't want one-bedroom apartments because they want a home office or somewhere for their dog or whatever. So households are shrinking. Migration is strong. We need greater migration, skilled migration, because this will be one of the things that will move certain parts of the economy.
Absolutely.
There's about 450, 500,000 at the moment, right?
Yeah.
Which is well above pre-COVID. So a lot of people sort of get swept up in the immigration issue because it gets really polarized or hijacked by certain aspects and elements of it where they will be framing migration of all these sort of bad people like ISIS brides and all this sort of stuff,
which
right?
Makes up,
which is
like single-digit decimal percentages of total skill.
Nothing
migrants.
at all. So what we're talking about, and to be fair, a lot of the migrants still coming to Australia are English.
Majority are from England.
Kiwis.
That is,
and India's up there
India,
right now.
China. Yeah.
So
They're your top 3, 4, 5.
And most migrants arrive and typically contribute immediately through some sort of endeavour.
And that's the rigor of what needs to happen to bring in skilled migrants, is that you're not going to bring you in to then sit on the sidelines for 2 years and find your feet. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are certain people, like you said, that very small percentage cohort who do need refuge, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the majority who come in with a skill that we don't have enough of to then contribute immediately.
Contributors.
Yep.
And then also a lot of them are temporary migrants as well, like students and all that sort of stuff, right? New dwelling demand's about 180 to 220 new dwellings a month, which we're way behind.
Yep.
It's a huge deficit. In that new supply completions, I think I saw some numbers last day or so, which they had a pretty good January, I understand, in relation to this, but it's like 150 to 170K per annum. It's below what's needed just to maintain.
And this is the thing too, like every state's different, the needs are different, and this doesn't split it out, these numbers, into which state needs what types of dwellings. And unfortunately, it's a lot easier to build high-rise because it's quicker, it's compact, and it does one vertical opportunity. But when it comes down to, like you said, Phil, even if you're a single or a couple, we just talked about off air a couple of days ago, the fact that the Victorian government's now mandating a couple of days work from home opportunities. Like, people need space at home. And even if you're a single or a couple, a one-bedroom apartment doesn't suffice.
Doesn't cut it.
So you actually need bigger premises. And if people are working from home more, then they want their home to be bigger. They want a backyard. They want space for an animal. They want to be close to parklands. These things don't just get created. So the issue is that even if the affordability and the approvals made sense, it still takes time. So
it takes time to build it. And then you got someone who wants to stump the dough to build, take the risk to build.
Yeah.
Nothing's guaranteed. And all of the new builds are based on pre-commitments, right?
Yep.
And people are a bit jittery at the moment. So anyway.
And finance is getting more expensive. Banks aren't necessarily jumping out of their skin to go and fund these big developments. And it goes back to what we're opening with, right? There is going to be changes to CGT laws in the May budget. Does this change the outcome or outlook for property over the medium to long term? I just don't see how.
So it's not going to change anything for you, the changes to the tax regime?
No. The philosophy that we employ is exactly the same. Hence why I brought up that small example of Darwin as an example, where I have heard and seen quite a few people start to think, okay, great, it's had a 20% year.
I have on good account because the Fast 50, which you've been working on behind the scenes with the team over at Smart Property Investment, Darwin may have some places.
We're not the. I'll just make sure we reiterate. We're not the sole contributor to that.
No. So this this is the fourth year of Fast 50. So where to put your money today for the best capital growth in 2027, and this is recommendations from a full cohort of buyers agents and other property specialists right across Australia, sort of giving their sense on investment. We'll go through it all. You'll see it all. There's a lot of work goes into it, but I do note that you're not recommending Darwin.
I shan't be.
No.
And for these exact reasons, where Darwin historically, you look at the last 10 years, if you buy property, if you're looking at the value of a property anywhere in Darwin today, I implore you to go and have a look at what that property was selling for potentially average 10 years ago, and I would go on a limb and say it was pretty close to exactly the same. Yeah. And it's not to suggest that it's a market that's consistently underperforming, but I can say that over the last 25 years, if you had invested the same amount of money in every capital city in Australia, it is equally the worst performer. And for us, as much as the Fast 50 talks about the forthcoming 12 months, 24 months, we don't want to be buying property for a short period of time. We want to get ideally quicker growth in a shorter period of time to do something with that equity. But the intention is that we still want to hold, regardless of the CGT laws, we're still wanting to hold for 7, 10, 12 years as a minimum cycle.
Well, that goes, you spoke about Ben Kingsley, who's the chair of PICA, who's the Property Investment Council of Australia. And a lot of you will know Ben. He has a very good podcast called The Property Couch as well. The recommendations of PICA to government, from what I understand, is connected in with that in relation to CGT changes. So he's pretty much saying, look, there's going to be some change. Their recommendation is that it's a sort of scaling,
5-year scaling.
So once if you hold the property for 5 years, you still get your 50% discount.
Absolutely, and I mean, for anyone who's interested in that, their recommendation, PICA's recommendation, and ultimately they're trying to be the ones who are the voice for the 2.3 million individual property investors to Parliament, is to suggest, well, if you buy a property and sell within 12 months, no CGT discount. You pay the full whack of tax. Hold for 12 months to 24 months, 10% discount. Then 2 years, 20%, 3 years, 30%, 4 years, 40%,
so
5 years, 50%.
Okay.
Yeah, so essentially ratcheting, which makes complete sense. I mean, if you're going to go and tinker with it and you want to disincentivize people to trade property speculatively, do that. That's a very simple way.
The issue I have, it's I haven't yet formed a position exactly. It's probably above my pay grade to do it, but it sounds like a sensible consideration from PICA, right? The issue you've got is that the bureaucrats down in Canberra who are sort of putting all this stuff together, they've just got blinkers on. They've probably already made a decision that they'll have their own internal people telling them what to do who have no exposure, understanding or connectivity with property investment or even business, right? Like, this is the reality of the world. So they're going to make these decisions in a bubble, and then everyone's going to say, we told you so. We tried to help you out. PICA presented really reasonable, thought-provoking way in which, and they're just going to dismiss it all. They're going to make their decisions. Everything's going to go wrong. Everyone's going to go, oh, look what happened.
But nothing will happen.
Nothing happened. They'll be finger pointing. Everyone go, it's not our fault. It's their fault. Blah blah blah.
They might take more tax, but I can guarantee you that we fast forward 2 or 3, 4 years, the prices of property in this country aren't going to be affected in the negative because of this. There will be supply issues. There will be rental supply issues. There will be rental increases that are outside of what's already on that same trajectory. But outside of that, from a capital growth standpoint, I do not think that there's going to be any changes whatsoever.
So the message to government then is focus on the main game, which is the supply issue, because that will be the greatest contributor to changing the affordability equation, which will be the greatest contributor to ensuring that you can better balance your books and probably keep a happier cohort of Australians.
Which will increase tax revenue.
There you go.
Like, if you want to increase tax revenue, there are ways to do that as well. And it doesn't. It just because you create more supply.
But this is the problem, though. Like, they don't need to increase tax revenue. Just spend less money. Well, like if the federal government was a family balance sheet,
responsible for
I know it's crazy. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? What? Spend less than what you make. Don't borrow more money. We're in structural deficits for the next 10 years. After doing afterpay.
Zip it.
I don't know. Anyway, but Fast 50 connected with it. I said last time we got together when we recorded all the Fast 50 stuff that I would buy a property.
That was basically 12 months ago.
Now, it was May of 2020. You're close.
It was close. We were putting it together this time last year. We're finalising the details and the data and everything else.
So you forced me to buy a property.
I did. I handcuffed you, and we
reluctantly,
very reluctant. I tell you what, it wasn't a straightforward process for anyone out there who's thinking that working with the great Philip Tarrant to buy an investment property is going to be a cakewalk, and he just says, yeah, whatever, I'll just buy it. Certainly the contrary. We've probably been working on this. We had a couple of false starts.
Many. But they were good properties. They just weren't good for me.
And this is a reality of I guess where it comes out. And to set the scene for anyone who's looking at this, Phil obviously is very well informed of the property investment landscape and the CGT discounts and all the other things that come with it. I mean, obviously you're buying property knowing full well that there's going to be tinkering with all this stuff in the background because you're buying for a long-term hold. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a self-managed super fund purchase. Correct. And again, like your timing, you're like, well, this is a 10-year hold, likely minimum, because I don't have intention of trading this property. I don't have intention to touch this property, to develop it, to modify it. I just want to buy in a market that's going to be at early stages of a growth cycle and buy the best possible property for the budget that I had set in place and manage the cash flows.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Then, look, I might sell it midway. I might
you might.
I might do. But if I don't, sell it when I hit an age where I can subscribe into the retirement regime and happy days.
Yeah.
You know, why not? But by that time, no doubt, they would have changed the they would have changed the thresholds to how much you're going to hold on wealth.
Pension age as well. And you're going to be working.
When I'm 90.
Yeah, they know. They've got you. They've got a photo of you there as the number one target in Parliament to say, let's make this bugger work.
I reckon they sit around they go, okay, let's look at this Phil Tarrant bloke. How can we get more money? Let's try and get more.
We've got him on payroll tax.
We've got him on payroll tax. We've got him on land tax. We've got him on stamp duty. We've got him on personal income tax. Got him on profit and business tax. They got me on. Whenever I park my car on the road, they tax me, they fine me, they get me for they get me for all the taxes connected with owning cars.
They've got your congestion tax or
There's
something
a congestion
like that.
tax. Mate, they got me the other day, which I was livid about.
Really?
Yeah. My mother-in-law's in town from the UK. She was supposed to be flying.
Mother-in-law tax.
Mother-in-law tax. And she was supposed to be flying back to England via Dubai.
Oh.
And they shut the airport.
Bloody
So we had to get a bridging visa for her.
Oh.
$500.
There you go.
For
Forced you into that.
For 1 month.
Shoehorned you into that.
Come on.
Seriously.
Really?
You can't fly, but
come on.
But that comes with
come on. And you call them up saying, we've got this problem. They go, oh, you need to work it out yourself. It's all online. Go to the website and go, just tell us what we've got to do. Tell us what visa shit is. We can't tell you that. This is the immigration department. Go and work it out yourself. Oh, by the way, we'll take $500 from you.
Yeah, for the privilege of that conversation.
For the privilege of doing the right thing.
I love it.
Yeah. Mate, they get you every step of the way.
She's not a foreign alien in the
how
country.
else can they get me?
Yeah.
How else can they get me?
They'll get you.
They get me.
Yeah.
They get me every
Medicare
step of the way.
levy.
Medicare levy. Yeah.
Extra
Medicare
levy.
Insurances have gone up.
Oh, they've bought
rapidly.
everything's
gone up.
Yeah.
Get me that tax. Get me on my bloody TUI's new.
Oh, absolutely.
The tax on that.
Yeah. Not on your wine though. If you maybe have to switch to some sort of viticulture opportunity.
We pay more tax on beer than gas.
Senator Pocock, let's get him on here.
He's all right.
He's all right. Well, he's definitely appealing to the punter to come up with these little random analogies of where tax goes and doesn't go.
You know, he's a talent, that bloke.
Yeah,
you know,
I think so.
He plays
he's
the role
a clever
of a senator.
bugger. He's articulate.
Plays the role of a senator really, really well. And look, you know, he's an independent. And he does it exceptionally well. He's well regarded, well respected. He's erudite and articulate. So, do you know what I saw the other day? Was at a function. The Premier of New South Wales. He's
Minns?
Good. Yeah, Minns.
He's a good operator.
He's, you know, not my flavour of politics, but he's.
I find he's more of a straight shooter than most others that I've seen in that position for a long time. And he's calling a spade a spade.
He's the standout. He's the standout state premier in Australia right
regardless
now.
of which way you're leaning. I agree with you because he's not afraid to say I'm not a fan, even if it's on the same side of politics that he's leaning to, and vice versa. He'll stand up for things which he knows aren't actually going to be accurate and correct.
He seems to be doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I agree.
Better than pretty much his counterparts in other parts of Australia. We get him on the podcast. You know, at least he's sort of proactively sort of trying to get like the patent books and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, they just announced, I think it was it, what's the name of the new suburb? They just announced in Glebe on the other side of Anzac Bridge for anyone who's in the New South Wales market, something Bay.
Oh, yesterday. No, that's the power
power station.
That was yesterday.
8,500 new homes being proposed there. But again, supply. There you go, opportunity for supply. Now, whether that comes to fruition, there's money that needs to be made there and stamp duty and all the other exemptions there. But there's a great opportunity to create A, new living, B, supply, and C, for governments, tax.
Heavy tax.
Yeah, anyway, Phil, we're diverting back to the tax conversation. Let's go to your property, why you bought it.
Well, I bought it reluctantly.
Right.
And I bought it because I felt like I had to.
But setting the scene there, so you own another property in your SMSF in Perth, and that's a commercial asset. Is that correct?
That's right. It's some of the stuff I have in my super fund.
Yeah. So you sort of saw that as a buy for cash flow with long-term growth again, and this was more to say, look, there's some surplus funds where you're wanting to get some exposure to a residential property, which is going to give you residential growth, probably lesser
capital growth. Yeah, and how quickly it will be until it's positively geared is probably a couple of years.
Yep.
However, one of the things with investing in your super fund is that you're making contributions.
Correct.
But the whole super fund's quite positively geared anyway because of other stuff I have in it, right? So it's not really an issue. So it's purely a capital growth play.
Yep.
It's
leverage into that. And leverage wise, what did you take on leverage?
80%.
80%. So, and again, going back to sort of the rationale of why I think personally residential property in your SMSF is powerful is that you can take on an 80% LVR. If you're not, then you're kind of missing the trick there because compounding, let's call it, the purchase was circa $830,000. If we're talking a 20% deposit plus another 5% for all your closing costs, let's call it somewhere around about $220,000, $230,000 cash that you need to buy that asset. You're turning that into an $830,000 asset. Now, assuming that grows, let's say below average for the next 10 years of 5%, 6%, which is below long-term averages, but that will effectively see in 15 years, that'll see that number double. So you fast forward 15 years, you bought it in 2026, fast forward to 2040, and by then you're probably going to be putting at least one foot up, maybe both feet up on a more of a relaxation time frame. But let's assume that regardless, you can choose to sell it with no tax then. But 15 years down the track, by 2040-ish, that $830,000 property circa $1.6 million if you got that 5 or 6% compounded growth. Now, you go back to say, well, you put $220,000, $230,000 on the table to make $800,000 net because it will be tax-free by that time if the government doesn't tinker with it. So you're getting 4x on your money over 15 years. So 400% growth over 15 years is essentially where the leverage allows you. Now, if you didn't have the leverage, that goes back down to about 150% growth. So it goes back down to why leverage in SMSF makes a lot of sense. But I guess why that property is probably where it comes back down to. We announced that Fast 50 this time, or May last year, and we're about to launch the new one this year. It's a market that has only just started its growth cycle.
Yeah, it is.
Exactly
so it's in Victoria.
Hint.
And it's in the capital of Victoria.
The capital of Victoria.
And it's on the eastern side of Victoria.
Are we playing Cluedo here?
I don't know.
Mate, I'm more than happy for you to tell everyone exactly where and what you bought, because for me, I mean, we don't hold any secrets. We give away this information.
Well, it's I don't think this location was slated in last year's Fast 50, but I've seen a prelim version of this year, so 2027's one, and this suburb doesn't actually make. It was recommended by a whole bunch of people. It didn't make the list, but it's. I don't want to give too much away, but it's directly one suburb to the north of somewhere that did, which was Cranbourne.
Yeah. There you go. And I think for me, this is probably. I mean, we've been working on this Fast 50 for quite some years now, and in and out of different markets, and a lot of the time we have clients, either new clients or existing clients, asking us, well, where's the Fast 50 telling us we should buy them? Well, look, whilst it's a great guide and we do put a lot of work and effort into providing it, there are not only 50 suburbs in Australia that you should or shouldn't be buying in. There are certainly hundreds of suburbs that would also fit the grade. And a lot of the time they are surrounding a lot of those markets that we're already recommending. And I think the big part here is that we've talked about this purchase being circa $830 purchase price. And
so just gives a colour: 4-bed, 3-bath, 2-car,
545 square meters, single story brick home,
walking distance to a public school, walking distance to a
couple of different shopping centres, 30 k's from CBD, close to highway corridors. Effectively a very owner occupier location.
It's an owner occupier house. It's not really. And this is the point. It's not really the sort of stuff I would usually buy. Like it's sort of stuff I was buying 10, 15 years ago, right? So I would call it, it's probably not right, but it's like a starter property. If you're new to investing,
it's a good foundational property.
It's the sort of stuff. It's a foundational
Yeah.
type of asset, and I've got it inside of a bubble of my self-managed super fund.
Correct.
That's how I
It's
view
serving
it.
a purpose.
It's serving
Yeah.
a purpose.
Yeah.
You know, I've got to put 220K into it. That's fine. I've got to work out, and you need to be careful with this and speak to your lenders around it, is that some lenders will require some sort of liquidity aspect of your super fund where they're going to want to actually see spare
5%
cash.
typically.
Spare cash liquidity in your in your super fund. The lender I've gone with, I don't think has that requirement, so that's okay. But what I will probably do with this is set it so it's about neutrally geared.
Yeah.
So which means I'll just put some money into an offset.
Yeah.
Just to offset its P&I mortgage.
Yep.
So you think about 15 years time, you know, you've done a fair bit of the heavy
Probably wedged
lifting.
out at least 40,
And if you
50,
and you look at the numbers, if you offset it today to be negatively geared,
Yep.
you would find that offset at a P&I level will probably get you to having it paid off
Yeah.
within those 15 years, right?
Correct.
So that's really important.
Absolutely.
You know, if you can compensate for maybe $400, $500, $600 a month, $1,000 a month for a period of time, you'll be surprised how quickly you can pay these things down.
It's a good point with SMSF, and I know we're honing in a lot on SMSF with your purchase, but you can't claim negative gearing and depreciation benefits necessarily in your SMSF the same way you can in personal name. So hence why running it negative is not actually that advantageous. So going back to the tax, there is no tax benefits. So you're not a burden on the tax man. You're just trying to make sure this thing is ticking over and basically breaking even as close to
you can do it. And you think
possible.
about it, right? You know, I think it goes up next year as well, but this year maximum contributions into super funds about 30K. I think it goes up to 32,500.
Yep.
Don't hold me to that. So if you're maxing out your super, you know, you can have your liquidity, and if you've got the ability to do it, you know, it'll be quite easy just to drop in. Well, you talk quite easy, but you pay all your super for the year right at the start of the year on the 1st of July.
Yep.
You can get that money into your offset straight away.
Yep.
And if you've got the liquidity to do that, that means you're saving. Saving money, interest quickly, which ain't going to change what you need to pay on your loan repayments, but you're paying off the principal quickly, and you can get yourself to it's one application of it. I don't look, this property, as you know, and your team will know, is I've just gone. Whatever, I'll push back the whole way to you guys going, I don't really want to make any decisions on this. You sort that, but I go, what about that? What about that? What about that? Right? Because I've got some knowledge around it.
Yep.
So I haven't been overly involved. I've sort of leaned on your team to get the job done.
Yep.
Purely because of time, energy, and effort.
Absolutely. And you're asking questions where you need to, because, I mean, you know this better than most. So you know the questions you want to ask just to agitate the edges and, you know, make sure that you're not wasting money where unnecessarily wasting money as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's ways to be clever about this.
There's ways to be done. But I reckon I probably looked at 10 properties before I chose this one.
Yeah.
And many of them were very good. They were just, for certain reasons, like something I don't want to do any work on it.
Yep.
This thing needs it's fine. This place needs I could do with a lick of paint maybe outside, but I don't need to do anything on it. Right? I don't need to do anything on it. But a lot of the other stuff was you would have considered it if it was outside of super.
Yep.
You know, there was some land plays there, and you know, some development opportunities and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, don't have the time, don't have the energy. I just want something I can just chuck in there and forget about it.
Yep.
It's probably, and I would say probably that I don't know if I'll put any more resi property inside of super. But maybe it depends.
But I mean, it's there for that purpose, right? Like you've got commercial with income, you've got this for growth and leverage, and then
you got all the other stuff.
You might assess it later down the track. And I can say personally too. I mean, I've bought 2 properties in the Victorian market in the last 8 months in my SMSF, very similar to this property. I'm liquidating something in Perth at the moment. That's in my SMSF there.
But you can keep that money in there, right?
Exactly.
The issue is trying to get money into your super fund, right?
Well, this is it. Yeah.
You know,
because it's already in there. Yeah.
You know, and you can do contributions. You can do 180. You can do 180K once. So if you've got 2 people in your super fund, 30 grand, whatever it is a year, non-concessional contributions, you need to speak to your accountant about it. It does get a little bit complicated. There is some tax consequences around it, but the challenge is getting money into your super fund. So you want to maximize it as much as possible without over-capitalizing your super fund. Once it's in, you can't get it out.
The wise is that you don't want to over-contribute when you've got things that you need to sort out in your personal names, i.e. your home loan debts that are in personal names, etc. They're things that you probably want to get on top of as well.
So what's going to happen to Hampton Park? Because I'm looking at some of the growth numbers from 23, negative 3.8%.
Yep.
I think it's fluctuated a bit. I think over the last 10 years it's done about 67%. growth, which is okay.
It's okay. Yeah. I mean, okay. if you in the grand scheme of things, it's good. But if you look at on an average of what's happened in Australia, it's probably a little bit below the long-term average over the last 10 years.
And 6 of those 10 years was COVID, post-COVID environment where, Victorian property has probably moved differently to other parts of the market. So
Correct.
4% in 2024, 3% in 2025, 8% in 2026. So
yeah. Starting to move the way that we would like to see it move to then enter into that market. And hence why for us, the focus has only really been the last 10 to 12 months in that market, because those numbers are starting to show exactly what we would like to see when we're entering into markets, which is a lack of supply, a lack of future supply, and starting to see that the demand is pushing the value up. And even, I mean, the grand scheme of things, you mentioned this property, if anyone's sort of thinking, well, that corridor, it's kind of similar to you mentioned you grew up in Seven Hills and you own property there as well. It's probably very similar to that type of location where you're an infill location, you're close to all amenities, you're on highway corridors, high school corridors. It's a 50, 60, 70-year-old suburb that's established and it's going to continue to be there. But value-wise, at circa $750,000 to $850,000, which is the home values in those markets, there is actually great affordability because it's predominantly double income with kids market, and there is actually a lot of capacity for people to pay more in property over time. So we see it as a very distinctly undervalued market at this stage in the cycle, because people have typically, they're spending about 25 to 28% of their household income to mortgage commitments in that type of market now. Yeah. Long-term averages say that it should be around 35 to 40% is when they get stretched. So there's about a 10% gap right there as we see it at the moment. So I think the next 2 or 3 years in that market will 8% in the last 12 months. I expect that's above long-term averages. I expect we're going to continue on that cadence in that market for the short to medium term, which is exactly why we wanted to be in there.
Well, I've got you on air saying that now. So
we'll reassess May 2027 or March. Well, it doesn't settle yet. So probably April
settles, I believe.
Yeah, we'll go April next year. We'll assess it over the 12 months, and I'll go out on a limb and I'll put it on air to say.
A crab dinner, right?
Crab dinner. Okay. What kind of crab though?
Alaskan King.
Alaskan King. Done deal.
So
what's the cutoff?
So it's 8:30 now. We'll get a valuation.
Well, let's go above average, whatever the average is nationally for the next 12 months.
Okay.
If it is below the average, I owe you a crab dinner. If it is above the average, you owe me a crab dinner.
Oh, you already got it. I just paid you by.
You haven't paid me anything. Thank you very much. It hasn't settled yet. Exactly. Either way, we're going to put it on air right now. Line in the sand. It's crab dinner. If it's above average, you owe me. Below average, I owe you.
Okay.
For year one.
Yeah,
and then maybe we'll reassess for year 2. I like it. It's a new currency.
Well, maybe blue.
For anyone out there, I don't take crab dinners on an annual basis for payment. Just so we're aware.
No, it is. But it is the currency of all.
You are paying the full fee before that.
Yeah.
Regardless of the outcome.
Alaskan King, but it's good. But interestingly, getting into the weeds of this. So your team went through it all. Looked at floods, looked at everything around it.
Easements, floods, the whole bushfire checks, because it is near a couple of different reserves as well. And I mean, for that matter, I mean, Phil, I guess to jokes aside, we've been working on this pretty tirelessly for probably 4 or 5 months with the team. And I mean, we assess it every week, look at opportunities. Some of those opportunities we don't send to you because they're just not where we like them to be. Some of them we were comfortable with, send to you. You tell us, look, it's just not for me. We try to make sure we gauge that feedback, and that feedback's changed over the last 6 months, to be honest with you. I mean, you haven't exactly been said straight away yes to anything. You've passed on the feedback that you want to see. We've adjusted, send you something, again, adjust again. And that is part of the process. I mean, our job is not to shoehorn you into what we see as the best fit. It's going to be, hey, we see this as a good fit for these reasons, but ultimately it's your purchase. So our job is to say, well, we want to make sure that A, it's going to be performing, but B, it has to be comfortable for you to buy, because your intention, and we want you to be intending to hold this property for 5 years, 10 years and beyond.
And that's the point that you need to remember as a property investor, is you're accountable for the decision making, right? Like,
absolutely.
You might be using a buyer's agent. They just don't say yes to everything they put in front of you. Right?
No.
Interrogate and question it. And a good buyer's agent will welcome that discussion. So shout out to Lena, who's sort of done this from your team. She's had the sort of,
she's had probably less favourable things to say about you.
Probably.
Both to and not to your face.
Yeah. And moving quickly is key, and I'll not always have time to look at stuff straight away and all this sort of stuff. So this is the nature of the beast. But let's see how we go. Hampton Park. And again, you got to look at it yourself. A place like Hampton Park, and you see there any suburb anywhere in Australia. Some bits of Hampton Park will be good. Some bits won't be so good.
Yeah.
For example, I think there's high tension power lines running up that sort of part of
about a kilometre
Melbourne.
from where it is there.
Yeah, so you know, all this stuff you just need to look and know and be happy with it. But this particular property it's just there's nothing. It's just a house.
Absolutely.
But it's 4-bedder. So I think it's most around there are 3-bedders. So
it's correct. 4-bedder, 3-bath.
Yeah, 4-bed. Yeah, 4-bed, 3-bath.
And then double car carport, rectangular block, really simple, owner-occupier appeal, easy to tenant out, all the things that you want to look for that are just
and you'll be able to sell it. You sell it pretty easily.
Yeah, exactly. If you need your money, I would say that it goes through, put it on market, 4 to 8 weeks, it gets sold at a price that you're comfortable with. This is the point of buying comfortable property that is always going to appeal to the masses.
Yeah, cool. All right, good. So we'll see you for the Pure Property Podcast in about a month's time.
Fast 50 is getting recorded.
Fast 50
very
next
soon.
week, I believe.
Is it next week? It's in the calendar. There you go.
So
Keep an eye out for
all
that.
All ready to go. Do you want to tell us about your book or anything?
Well, you've already told people
wouldn't be a
about
podcast.
Well, let's talk about the audio book. For anyone who's listening here, they are audio podcast listeners, obviously. So I think for my book's sake, Pure Property Investment, if you jump onto the website, you can actually download the audio book, which you can listen to $4.95. It gets delivered to your inbox literally within hitting the buy now button. And then wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can listen to A Surfer's Guide to Property Investing, and you can go to different chapters, which is the beauty about an audio book. You don't have to listen to it from start to finish. You can scroll, toggle through, and we cover off the last 40 years worth of property data and everything about building a large portfolio, from fundamental properties through to large scale construction and everything in between. So jumped on to purepropertyinvestment.com to download the audio book, and it can be in your inbox immediately.
Wow.
Wowza.
Wow, what a weekend ahead of you. Listening to that. It's actually a really good thing. If you're doing something, walking the dog, cutting the lawn.
Exactly. We've got headphones on now. I have headphones on a good few hours a day. And a lot of people do, where they just find time. It's just a way to zone out and educate yourself and sometimes put yourself to sleep.
That's what you need. So in the gymnasium, a lot of people listen to podcasts at the gymnasium.
On the stepper, on the elliptical.
Yeah. It gets in the way though when you're trying to do your sort of inspo stuff. And I've not been to a gym. You wouldn't tell.
You couldn't tell.
I haven't been to a gym in 5 years, right? But from what I understand now, it's just people taking videos of
lots
themselves.
Of selfies.
Is that all it is? Setting up
well,
tripods, and there's like etiquette now. It's like you can't walk in front of someone's camera.
Yeah, I can't say. I go to the gym regularly. I can't say that I've seen too many people on the Insta or on the Snapchatting themselves. And I think for me, I'm like, man, there's a certain point of life where I'm like, how have we come to this? And if I did see it, I'd probably be the first to walk through the visual, because for me, it's not the time
the world
place.
What the world doesn't need is another property podcast and or another fitness influencer.
Well, look, to my defense and to our defense, we were doing this literally when this all first kicked off 10 years ago. Now I know that 10 years ago there weren't people sitting on a Smith machine doing heavy squats with a tripod set up and showing other people their technique and then trying to spruik some sort of peptide at the same time.
It's all about peptides, injectables, injectable nads.
And gummies, creatine gummies.
Creatine gummies. Are you on the creatine gummies?
No, I'm not, but I do see plenty of them hit my feed for whatever reason.
God.
Yeah. Questionable.
Anyway, so purepropertyinvestment.com.
That's it. And you can lock in a time to chat with me, because I can tell you.
Do you actually get to talk to you?
That's all I do. Those who are listening,
so you actually get to talk to the bloke.
You talk to me.
Yeah.
Talk to me. That's my job. Is I want to be speaking to you first and foremost. You're not going to be farmed out to a 20-year-old high school dropout who just wants to earn some sort of money on a sales pitch.
Be nice.
Well, look,
be kind.
I'm trying to be kind. I'm trying to be, but the reason why we are a small team, Phil, is you know this firsthand. But look, we're not here to try and buy thousands of properties unnecessarily. We're here to work with people to get really good outcomes, and by doing that, we have to be controlled and small and niched. And I speak to every one of my clients. That's my job. Is first and foremost. So if you are wanting to maybe even get ahead of the curve with the 2027 Fast 50, I would say jump onto that same website, purepropertyinvestment.com, lock in a time now, because that's not going to be launched for a fair few weeks, maybe even months.
No.
And you might get a jump on it because that has been finalised.
No, I got the wrong phone. No, I think we're launching it via a live stream.
We are.
in 2 weeks' time.
Well, I'm not going to give away the secret sauce before that, but I can tell you I do know a few of the crucial parts of the recipe. Okay. Let's put it that way.
So mid to late March is when it's going to be happening. So and once that happens, your calendar gets full for quite some time.
It does a little bit. So jump in early because by that time it'll be live and ready.
Okay. All right. Well, quite a lot covered today. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to check out the crew over at Pure Property. Have a chat with them.
Like and subscribe to this podcast too.
We need liking and subscribing.
We do need.
We never ask.
I don't ever ask, but I am today.
I never ask.
I'm going to ask for today. So if you're sitting there finishing up now, please just hit that subscribe button because it does push this out. Leave a review. Reviews are definitely not optional. I'm happy for negative reviews, positive reviews, but either way, like and subscribe and just put hate mail in there if you really want to, if that's the way you're inclined.
I've actually got someone here who just deals with all mine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because you get so much of it.
To be fair, I don't.
But you clearly need someone to
I mainly
do it.
get love letters.
Right. Does your wife know about that?
No, they're love letters from other property investors, which I get a real kick out of, right? Like when people go, you just randomly, everything I do these days, there's someone's a property investor and they go, oh, Phil, how you going?
We were surfing the other day, you and I. Randomly just ran to, probably not a fan. He certainly wasn't a fan, but he was a colleague.
No matter where you go these days, these things happen. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.